Good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to you in this special session that is entitled The Challenges and Opportunities for Young People in the Transition from Learning to Decent Work in the Arab region. So this session is held as part of the Arab Forum, the Arab Sustainable Development Forum. We are convening here in preparation for the upcoming meeting in forum in New York soon. With the international and ongoing crisis, the fast development in the technological field, and the ethical challenges that everything that all of this is producing, the youth are feeling so much challenged. This has, on the other hand, made the youth more aware and made them more insisting to survive and be more resilient. We're honored here. We're honored today to bring together so many young leaders who were active in their countries and to discuss these issues. We will move now to the International Labour Organization from the regional office of Beirut, Mr. Kishore, to speak to us in this session. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me begin by thanking the youth representatives who are here armed with good ideas on easing young people's transition to work. I also thank those young people representatives who participated actively in designing this special session. Let me also welcome our esteemed panelists who were kind enough to spare their valuable time for this important discussion. Thanks to Dr. Nadir Kabani for working relentlessly on examining the key bottlenecks in young people's transition to decent work and transitions within decent work, best practices of the region, and coming up with the recommendations for the ILO UNICEF study with technical support of ETF. The study will definitely, be further enriched by the discussion and particularly by the ideas of the young people's representatives here. Youth unemployment in our region, especially for young women, is the highest in the world, and the pace of market recovery is challenging. Thereby, this topic for the topic for this discussion is extremely important and timely at this crucial juncture for more than one reason. And more so in the context of many targets of SDG 4 and SDG 8, and also in the context of the global drivers of change that is changing the world of work. This is a more challenging situation for the refugees and internally displaced youth, especially girls and women. The key global drivers of change, such as demography, particularly youth bulge in this region, technological changes, particularly IR4, climate change and globalization, including trade and migration, are changing the world of work and the way work is being organized. More rapidly now, it is changing more rapidly now than ever before in the human history. The COVID-19 pandemic has become another major factor impacting the world of work and impeding the young people's transition to the labor market. The pandemic has further exposed the pre-existing weaknesses of our education and learning system, employment services, and active labor market measures that have been major impediments in young people's transition to decent work. The UN system and its organizations, UN organizations have been extremely concerned about the labor market recovery and youth employment. They have come up with various initiatives to improve the situation. Apart from various countries and the region-specific assessment of COVID-19 impact on the labor market and the youth unemployment of UN agencies, I would like to highlight some of the recent initiatives, such as ILO's global call to action for human-centered recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. This program for youth transition to labor market and transition within the labor market supports quality education, training, and decent work for young people to maximize their potential as a source of dynamism, talent, creativity, and innovation in the world of work, and as a driving force for shaping the better future of work. It supports a strengthening public and private investment in skills development and lifelong learning, including through universal access to quality education and more equitable and effective access to training, including apprenticeship, career guidance, upskilling, and reskilling, and through other active labor market policies and partnerships that facilitate successful labor market transition and reduce skills mismatches, gaps, and shortages, including for the low skilled and the long-term unemployed. At a recently held global forum, the call to action got firm support of various UN organizations, including UNICEF, UNDP, WFP, and various other UN agencies, almost all multilateral development banks, and 24 countries, including the head of the state of 12 countries. Another recently UN-wide initiative includes called Global Accelerator for Employment and Social Protection, which has a clear focus on youth employment. But the success of these initiatives would not be there without young people's participation and their active and informed support. These initiatives, however, provides opportunity for youth to play an active role in to support the labor market players with their ideas, but most importantly, seeking accountability and progress made. With these words, I wish very best for today's session, and we all would be very keen to hear the voices of of the youth and their role as agency. Over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kashour, for these invaluable inputs. Let me move now to UNICEF, to Mrs. Marlin.
Thank you very much, Dear Ahmad, and a pleasure to be with you on the call, everybody. It's great to be able to today to welcome you to this youth-led special session of the Arab Forum for Sustainable Development, which is led by young people, and this is the important aspect of it. We are here today to listen and to discuss together with you. Young people in the region and their audience, young people want to work. They want to work for themselves. They want to work for each other. They want to work for their families, for the people in the cities in which they live. They want to work for the people in the rural areas where they live. They want to work for the people who are in the countries where they live. Young people are really committed, and they want to be engaged, and they want to be helping to address the issues that affect them. And that includes some of the things that Kishore already brought up: the learning crisis, climate change, challenges associated with migration, challenges associated with finding space for their voices and their capacity to do things. So young people, in preparation of this session, the team has been working really hard to bring this together. It was a massive amount of work that went into this session by the young people themselves. And what they have produced, and what we will be listening to and engaging with today, will not only be informing the report of the Arab Forum for Sustainable Development, but it will also feed into the regional high-level meeting, which is going to be held in Amman on 23rd and 24th of May of this year, which is a high-level meeting bringing together governments, private sector, young people themselves, and civil society organizations around the theme of young people's learning, skilling, social inclusion, and transition to decent work. So your recommendations and your thoughts will feed into this forum as well. And then this forum, again, will, as Ahmad already mentioned, feed into the Secretary General's initiative, the Global Summit on Transforming Education, which will be held in the autumn of this year. So this is important work that you are doing, and we are really looking forward to hearing more, to learning from you, and to have a good discussion today. So thank you so much, and looking forward to the session. Back over to you, Ahmad.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Marlene. Let me take some of your time, and we will share with you a question on the screen, and you will be able to choose your answer. Who from the following do you think are more capable of supporting the youth and actually making change in the reality of young people transition to decent work? You can choose one option or multiple options. Apparently, one participant is saying we do not have the option to choose the answer. This is a question that is addressed to the participants. As panelists, we will not have the option to vote on this question. It's only for the participants, for the attendees. Hello, everyone. Are we supposed to choose one option or multiple options? Because when we talk about policies, for example, they have to be participatory. So family alone cannot do the job, private sector. This is why Ahmed says, this is why you have a number of options. We should be talking here, or we should be able to choose multiple or multilateral policies that enable a participatory approach. So maybe we should start by choosing the public sector, because the public sector is the start of everything. The youth will not be able to work on their own. And we then have to have the donors, the funders of the public sector. And then we move to family and schools. You're absolutely right. So we can start, and then we move to the family and then to the schools. Thank you very much. We can see now the results to this question. A private sector, 51%, in your opinion, is the main influencer, and then followed by the public sector, followed by donors and funders, family, then schools. Thank you all for your participation in this poll, and we wanted to learn about your insights and opinion of this question. Let's move now from this question, and let me present to you a very close friend who helped us a lot with data, the founder and the CEO of Medici. He is a researcher and in the field of development. He has more than 20 years of experience. Dr. Nader Qabbani, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Ahmad. Let me thank you all, and let me specifically thank the young people who organized this session. I would like to present to you the results of research that we are carrying out in collaboration with ILO, UNICEF, ETF, and the European Training Agency. And it is related to the issue of the transition of the young from education to or from learning to learning to earning to working. So first we will be tackling, we will be providing you with an overview of the young people's transition, and then deficits and opportunities, skills and agency, some challenges that the region is faced with that will impact on the transition of the youth to the labor market. So first, the main challenge is unemployment. Youth unemployment in the MENA region is the highest in the world, more than for over than 30 years. It reached 28% in 2020. That is almost double the world average, which is 15%. This phenomenon is present in almost all all the region's countries, and it is leading to so many social disorders or disabilities and social frustrations. Now, we see some difference or some discrepancies between women moving to the labor market and men moving to the labor market. For young men, we know that they see high unemployment rates. They're not, the main reason for that is the lack of adequate training and learning. Having the young men associated or linked to the labor market is almost the same of the world average, or almost around 38%. For the young men, for the young women, they see the lowest LFP rates in the world by far, that is 10%. They see the highest unemployment rates as well, 45%. Even though we see there is a substantial percentage of young women who are engaged in the learning process. However, after the graduation, their link to the labor market, their LFP rate is very low. That's 23%, which is less than half the world average. The main reason of this, behind this phenomenon, is the fact that we lack decent jobs, decent job opportunities also in or in the public sector. And despite the fact that we have job security and decent jobs, however, we do not have enough jobs to accommodate for all the incomers, all the job seekers. For the private sector, we see that it is bound by certain laws, and it faces some challenges that keep it from producing job opportunities to accommodate the job seekers. All of this lead the newcomers to the job market to join the informal labor market, which doesn't have proper salaries and doesn't ensure job security. 75% of the youth working in the region work in the informal sector. Here, the second issue that the youth suffer from is the quality of education that is provided in the MENA region. We know that there were endeavors to bring the young to schools, building schools. However, the focus was on accommodating the young men and women in the schools rather than the quality education. And many of those international educational examinations didn't were not a choice for many of those young men. Like we have seen the scores not exceeding half of the international scores. Also, young people are leaving school without the skills they need to succeed in today's economy. If we look into the MENA region, we notice that the average years, or the average number of years of being engaged in the educational process, is almost similar to the average number of years of being engaged in the labor of a market. That's almost 7 years. Also, the average salaries are way less than the international average salaries. And that is due to the weak skills that keep the young people from moving to the labor market with proper salaries. The issue here is that the youth do not have much solutions to address these problems, and that makes them resort to emigration. And we see that the percentage of people desiring, of young people desiring to leave their home country is more than 70%. In Lebanon, the usual average used to be 35, but after the financial crisis hit the country, it doubled to almost 77% now. Last point we would like to raise with regard to the situation of the youth, the differences between the gender differences. Even though educational levels are almost similar between male and female, or young men and women. However, we see that women are not linked as much as men to the labor market, and that is linked to or attributed to a number of reasons, being one of them being women, the home role that women are expected to perform, the fact, the stereotypes, the lack of decent job opportunities provided to women, etc. And lastly, another problematic issue comes to play in the region. That's the refugees, the movements of migrants, and this causes a problem to the youth who are residing in the host countries and in the countries of origin. That is creating much discrepancy and shortages in the available job opportunities. Last but not least, the novel COVID-19 virus, and I'm giving you here an historical overview about the situation of the youth in the region. So in the last 2 years, the youth were suffering also from the implications of the novel COVID-19 pandemic, which impacted negatively on the newcomers to the job market. Very quickly, let me present to you some obstacles and some attempts at reforms with regard I will be tackling these from the perspective of education, job search, and employment. Concerning education, basically, it's pressing to reform the educational systems to encourage autonomy and encourage critical thinking and the inquisitive thinking. The main issue at the level of the educational systems in the region is to accommodate the large number of incomers to the educational systems. And the focus, as I said earlier, was based on building new schools rather than providing quality education. It's high time now to focus on quality education, in addition to other types of reforms, such as developing the skills of teachers, giving more autonomy to schools, providing varied types of learnings, because now we focus more on interpersonal and soft skills. Also provide more space for critical thinking and inquiry. As for the TVET systems, they have to be better connected and linked to the practical experience and offer other pathways to higher education. The main issue in the region is the low social status that is linked to the TVET systems. Past reforms were focused on modernizing equipment, updating curricula, reducing fragmentation across line ministries, and delivering these programs. But future reforms should be focused on improving links to the labor market, provide more applied dual track programs, reduce the social stigma or social stereotypes of such programs, building pathways to university through the TVET. Also, we should help women to access all industries and not keep certain industries restricted or confined to men. Also, we need to be able to provide lifelong learning opportunities. For the labor market, governments have to work on enabling the formal private sector to grow and create needed jobs. We know that the high youth unemployment is mainly due to limited decent work opportunities. Past reforms have focused on improving business climate and supporting youth entrepreneurship. The future, the current reforms that the countries are focusing on, they consist of creating special economic zones, identifying and unleashing growth sectors, removing barriers to trade, supporting entrepreneurship, as I said, removing barriers to trade, improving access to finance for the youth, and providing mentorship for young women, specifically those women who do not have proper and adequate mentoring and coaching opportunities. Also, governments should be focusing on policies that support job mobility and career development or career advancement. The main issue here is that policymakers so far focus on work conditions of initial employment specifically. They need to focus more on transition. The future reforms should focus on working on formalizing jobs for youth, even if lower initial pay and job security. In the past, the reforms were focused on launching those initiatives that allow grace periods for firms and businesses to test young workers, while allowing those businesses and firms to impose on its workers all their laws and bylaws. Last but not least, there is this issue of the transitional period. most governments focus more on education or on work and not on that space between the two. Past reforms have focused on providing insurance against unemployment or unemployment insurance and wage subsidies. And assessments have shown that these policies are not that useful. So we need to focus more on career planning and guidance, including publishing, disseminating information for better decision making, reducing job search costs, such as the cost of transportation, the daycare, and so on and so forth, and building work experience on the job, training or internships or apprenticeships. I think that there is a lack at this level. I'm almost done. I will focus on some challenges facing the region, which will impact on the youth in the next decade. The first one, the region is now facing a new demographic wave that will last for another 10 years, and it will impact on schools, the youth, and the labor market. And we need to start taking the precautionary measures in order to avoid the implications of this challenge. Second challenge is the digital revolution that is happening across the world. It generates many opportunities, but only for those youth who have the right skills to benefit from this revolution.
Unfortunately, not all of the young persons do have the required skills. One last point or one last challenge, which is the climate change that would largely impact the Middle East and North Africa, which could increase rural-urban migration and would also create pressure and stress on the infrastructure in cities, as well as pressure on the labor market, education, and schools. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Dr. Nader, for your insightful ideas. Before we move to the next speaker, I'd like to tell you that the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen would allow you to post your questions. If you have any inquiry or questioning about our today's session, please use the Q&A, and we will be asking your questions in a while. ASCO will be also given time to respond. Now that we're done with Dr. Nader, I will move to my colleague Rana Abu Jaber, who will be informing us about the outputs related to Dr. Nader's report. Rana, the floor is yours, please. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ahmed. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being interested in the most problematic issues facing the youth in our region. I will start with the outputs of Dr. Nader Kabani's report, challenges, solutions, suggested solutions, and recommendations. Under outputs, we first focus on the increasing unemployment rate in the region with the economic deterioration, the difficult access to the labor market because of the educational system and the lacking skills that would enable the youth to join the labor market, in addition to some discrimination types, gender, sexual, and class-based discrimination, the global warming, the COVID pandemic, digital and technological issues. Under challenges at the educational level, the educational curricula is totally away from the requirements of the labor market and rather focus on the theoretical aspects, with the lack of vocational guidance for new jobs and the needs of the labor market, which pushes the youth to go for other specialties due to the large number of graduates and the lack of the labor market opportunities. Lack of references and sources in Arabic that would provide accurate data is an issue. The youth's ambitions and skills do not match the requirements of the labor market. That is, of course, due to social and economic problems like poverty, school dropouts, which push the young people to work at an early age before even getting the needed degree. So the young people are being exploited, and they accept any work, any salary because of the economic and living conditions, which results in an increasing number of migrants and loss of hope of finding a decent job. In addition to the discrimination that the youth is exposed to, especially when it comes to women, people with special needs, and refugees. So there is lack of equality in the opportunities that, of course, increases the psychological pressure on the youth. With regard to the political and security reality, the criteria for employment is not clear. That is why the role of mediation and WASTA is crucial. Security problems, political conflicts, and the lack of stability in the Arab region threaten our future, especially in terms of the lack of interest in creating private businesses. There is also lack of support from state institutions in organizing official and professional work. In addition, the young people are discriminated. They're not engaged in decision-making processes, and the volunteering work is not that exploited, and appropriate job opportunities or incentives that would encourage them to carry on are absent. That affects the hope and leads to despair, especially when coupled with lack of awareness. And amidst the recent developments like the COVID-19 pandemic, we've noticed to what extent the pandemic impacted the labor market. A lot of private businesses have had to shut down, which resulted in arbitrary dismissal of young people without abiding by clear mechanisms and laws. Allow me to share with you some testimonies and quotations by the youth. I prefer unorganized or informal work because it gives me financial sufficiency and flexibility more than the formal work, which is characterized by dependence and strictness in the conditions. Another quotation: the current development projects focus on achieving the goal of reaching the largest number of beneficiaries and not the quality of projects and achieving their goals. The third quotation: we hope that programs and projects focus on the needs of the young people and the skills required to move into the labor market, and not on the subjects of training that attract funding sources. Now, moving to the suggested solutions that would improve access to the labor market. Of course, we do agree with Dr. Nader, and would like to add up the following points. The need to continuously update the educational curricula. So the educational curricula should always match the requirements and needs of the labor market to reflect the evolving needs of the society. To harness technological progress positively and increasing job opportunities for young people, such as adopting new methods, such as the remote work to save costs, and open new opportunities to ensure cooperation between both the public and private sectors in order to create new job opportunities, such as employment programs that share the costs of both sectors. The youth should be encouraged to adopt social entrepreneurship, which would help address several problems. The youth should be given a pivotal role in the decision-making processes and strategy development, in being engaged in the development of the plans and policies, and equipping the youth with the required needs, to intensify trainings that enhance the skills required to transit to the labor market, such as the technological skills, work ethics, and institutional work mechanisms, to train the young people and the mechanisms of research making and data collection, to create exchange programs as well. For the public sector, the youth should be engaged in drafting comprehensive and participatory public policies between governments, and youth should be provided with protection in the field of work to benefit from the experiences and competences of the private institutions, to support startups and organize regional initiatives and exhibitions. For the private sector, it is possible to activate the corporate social responsibility, the CSR. Next slide. Yes, so it's possible to activate the corporate social responsibility. This is something that happens by providing paid training opportunities for the youth. So through internships and training courses that would offer digital skills to involve the youth in the implementation of research and statistical studies on a regular basis. For the donors, it is essential to provide joint funding across the sectors to monitor the implementation, provided that the projects are based on the needs of the youth, and research data to provide technical and financial support to governments to activate their role and improve their performance. However, one entity on its own cannot achieve real change in the labor market. That is why our joint recommendations revolve around fostering cooperation, strengthening coordination between the different decision makers at the regional level in order to come up with clear labor policies, by creating a special network in order to find solutions to the unemployment. It is also possible to ensure coordination and communication between different agencies to avoid redundancy, and to train young people in all regions and remote areas so that they're able to train their peers with time, to reduce the gap between education and work, to support youth innovation, to support youth mental health, to refine the life and technical skills of the youth, to support projects that increase research. And allow me at the end to share with you certain limitations or challenges that we faced in the research. The research didn't include statistics from the last 2 years because it wasn't possible to have access to the data. With all what happened, everything changed. That is why we need additional evidence and data on the effectiveness of education, skilling and vocational training progress in the different parts of the region. And it would be important to map donors program in the area of young people transition to work and assess the efficacy and efficiency. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Rana, for this presentation. Thank you very much for your efforts. And I hope that this presentation was fruitful, productive, and really conveyed the opinions of the youth in a direct manner. Let me move to the fourth part on interviews, face-to-face interviews between the youth and representatives from different sectors. Let's get started with Mrs. Samar, who works in Roya FM as a news anchor She took part in several local and international trainings related to gender and the youth in cooperation with Friedrich Ebert and the Arab Federation on Workers. She was selected as a representative of Palestine, and she is the representative of Palestine in the Confederation of the Youth. Now, Yumna Mamdouh will be the interviewer of Samar. Mrs. Samar and Mrs. Yumna, you have enough time to go for this interview. Thank you, Ahmad. Hello, Mrs. Samar. I'd like to welcome you here. Thank you for being with us. Thank you, Mrs. Yumna. Thank you, Mr. Ahmad. I'm very pleased to be with you today. Mrs. Summer, based on your experience in the Confederation and in the rights of the workers, what are the challenges facing the youth in the Arab region to go for a transition towards decent employment? Back to what Dr. Nader and Dr. Kisho mentioned, and back to what Dr. Nada highlighted, the youth crisis comes as a result of compounded challenges and the lack of political stability. The crisis of the youth in the region is not only in education, training, or a structural lack of decent employment, or the high unemployment rate, or the difficult access to job opportunities, but it is a growing poverty rate and even the temporary low-income employments and the informal sector employment. So the youth got disproportionately affected because of the limited job opportunities, and that confirms what Dr. Kishore mentioned and Dr. Nader highlighted, that the youth witnessed the highest unemployment rate. And here the trade unions aim at organizing workers who work in the informal sector in order to protect them from violations that they could be faced with, because as we mentioned, the largest number of female and male workers are those who work in the informal sector as a result of the difficult economic situations, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the lack of trade union liberties. So it is not possible for trade unions to enjoy a pivotal role with the lack of freedom and organized sectors, because there are also different new types like the remote work and the flexible work modalities. And so far, these modalities are not organized, which is a big dilemma confronting the trade unionism. Now, let me mention the lack of social dialogue, including the tripartite dialogue, the technical committees and the outputs of the education, the lack of employment security, the economic deterioration, and the old and obsolete educational curricula, the closed labor market, lack of information about the labor market, and the scarcity of businesses that support the youth, lack of effective integration, lack of monitoring, and effective assessment. Unfortunately, the policies are based on the competitiveness between a supply and demand. The states are not able to adopt interventional policies. There are no programs that ensure a smooth transition to the labor market with an initial integration of the youth for at least 1 year. The lack of programs equipped with enough resources that would provide financial support to the youth that are being trained. Banks and institutions also play an important role in making it more difficult for the youth to have access to the funding means as a result of barriers, credit, discretionary barriers. Policies are not able to consider the youth as a priority and as an added value. There is a systematic absence of the youth and the decision-making processes the present and in the future. The decreasing income. The public sector workers are not included by the social protection and not covered by social protection, and they constitute a large part of the employers in the Arab world. There is no official incubator and no real benefit of the skills and competences. It is because the youth do enjoy a lot of qualifications and skills. They just need further development in order for them to be integrated in the labor market. Another problem that I mentioned again is the lack of trade unionism freedom, the obsolete laws and regulations that do not match the latest development. I'm sorry for interrupting, but we're running out of time. And currently we notice that we have a lot of workers, private and public institutions that lack awareness as to the workers' rights. How do you think we can raise awareness at the level of the youth so that they know their rights? First, through the organizing, to launch organizing campaigns, and that requires legislative reforms in order to make sure that the labor laws are consistent with the international standards, having a unionism related law, because laws do not cover the remote work and the flexible work modalities. Such an empowerment, of course, requires a database based on analysis and assessment in order to also cover the latest developments, because the youth work in the informal sector and they're not easily accessible. It is possible to raise awareness at their level after they're empowered, they'll be able to get their rights protected. Workers' courts are important. Also, complaints mechanisms are needed. Inspections have to be maintained to make sure that there is respect to the occupational health and safety. It is also necessary to fill the gap between the employers, the workers, and the government to foster dialogue in order to pinpoint deficiencies and address them. A new social dialogue that meets the ambitions and expectations of the youth, especially women and the youth, that would achieve social justice is necessary. That requires a political will, that also requires strong trade unions and independent unions that represent the workers, that are capable of negotiating, coming up with alternatives. And just and fair employment contracts should be developed that would guarantee social protection and health protection. And again, I reiterate the need for a social protection Arab fund to support the income and to support the new social contract based on the social dialogue for the sake of development and social justice, as well as decent employment. It is necessary to turn the informal sector into a formal sector through legislations that would cover the new types of modalities and allow workers to join trade unions and claim their rights. All right, Doctor, after we learned all of this, we're left with the gender-based discrimination. In your opinion, how can we address this situation inside businesses in brief? First, gender measures should be taken into consideration, ensure equal pay and sharing of the responsibilities at the different levels in order to ensure protection against discrimination, harassment, to amend laws and ensure equality at the workplace. Here, governments, employers, and stakeholders should develop social and economic policies and mechanisms that would strengthen equality at the workplace, like the maternity protection to provide care for the children, and prevent harassments, leaves, work arrangements, etc. The gender component should be mainstreamed when it comes to occupational health and safety, and related policies having women-based programs to support job opportunities in order to increase participation of women in the labor force. We also need to go for a quick reconsideration of the inspection standards. Female inspectors should be appointed. And one last thing, to implement the SDG 5 through the strengthening of the political commitment to gender equality and establishing policies that would end all types and forms of discrimination against women. Thank you, Mrs. Samar. Now back to my colleague, Ahmed. Thank you, Yumna. Thank you, Samar. Now we move to the second interview with Mrs. Lama, who works Dr. Lama at the Ministry of Education. Dr. Lama is currently the Executive Director of the Coordination Unit. Sorry, okay, we move to interview two. Second interview was Mr. Ghali. I'm sorry. Okay, Mr. Ghali Jolio, a Moroccan businessman. He started when he was 14 years old and established AfriTrip Morocco. The Sans Limit, the first non-governmental organization in Morocco working on tourism and traveling. He is the president of the Youth Social Entrepreneurs Camp group, which aims at developing entrepreneurship and personal skills. Haitham Al-Uradi will be the youth interviewer. Now the floor is yours, Mr. Ghali and Ayman. Haitham, thank you, Mr. Ghali, for accepting this invitation and for sharing your experience. The first question that comes to my mind was the tendency of entrepreneurship. What are the main challenges that the youth could be exposed to when establishing their own businesses, and how could they be protected from such risks, or at least mitigating them?
Or political figures, it is hard for young people to be able to innovate in those sectors when they start facing competitions. And maybe potentially to be able to address those issues and support young people, I do believe that there is a need to invest in entrepreneurial ecosystem in universities and support student entrepreneurs to be able to follow their studies, be great students, learn in universities, and at the same time, develop their ventures and offer networking opportunities, mentoring, and funding for student entrepreneurs. A major example that I'm currently part of at Cornell University here in the US is that an e-lab incubator, where students are actually receiving credits to follow their ventures and be able to be students, and at the same time, focus on their degrees and be able to do both at the same time. I believe there's a big need for that in the Arab world.
شكرا لك سيد غالي. بالنسبة للسؤال الثاني.
Thank you, Mr. Ghali. Second question, based on your experience in the entrepreneurship, what are the additions or the modifications that are needed in the Arab curricula in order to achieve a smooth transition to the labor market?
I think a big need that you guys talked about in your great presentation is that there is a big need for experiential learning for students in both high school and universities. So starting from high school, we need to have youth more involved in potentially community service, small projects, get them to get out of the classroom and be able to develop some important skills that no one can teach in the classroom. We are trying to do that at the Moroccan Youth Social Entrepreneurs Group by getting students involved in projects, and we can see a very, very big return of students learning a lot of things and getting and being able to develop their passion and knowing what they want to do when they are moving to university. And for university students, I do believe that there is a big need for structured paid and innovative internships in both the public and private sectors. So universities first would be able to place students to get experience with big companies or public organizations or even small startups. And from the other side, we need companies to have developed programs to support young people in their learning. So if you ask students who graduated from the best universities in Morocco, the Arab world, or even in the world, and about the percentage of the skill that they have used or developed, or knowledge that they have developed in the classroom or university, and that they are currently using in their daily job, they will potentially tell you between 10 and 20%, and that they have developed the rest of the skills either through training they received at their job or internships or previous experience. So we can't expect Arab youth to perform well without giving them any previous experience and training in the field that they want to do. There are many soft skills, as I said, that no one can teach in the classroom, and there is a big need to develop those experiential learnings for you to develop their passion and interest in a career that they would like and enjoy. We can't expect people to know what they want to work in the future without giving them experience before, and making sure that when they move to their job, they are actually qualified and they are given and they are growing as individuals.
شكرا لك سيد غالي. بالنسبة للسؤال الأخير برأيك
Thank you very much, Mr. Ghali. For the second question, what is the support? What do we need from the private sector in order to facilitate the transition of the young to the decent work?
If young people are more qualified to transition to a decent work, and they have better skills to be able to give to big companies and the private sectors, at the end of the day, the private companies and the private sector would be more impacted and would have better human capital to advance their companies than actually the impact that young people would have. So, but if we want to think about it from a different perspective, a development of the economy overall and a macro development with the economy and the educational system would lead to have companies needing more qualified human capital. And I do believe that there is a need of collaborations between the public sectors, universities, and the private sector to be able to design programs for those youths and have commitments either from maybe government to oblige companies to be able to train students before actually graduating from university, and make it a commitment from the public and private sector to be able to do that.
شكرا لك سيد غالي على الإجابات القيمة والعودة لك.
Thank you very much, Ghali. I go back to you, Ahmed. Thank you, Haitham, Mr. Ghali as well. Let's move now to Mrs. Lama An-Natur, who is now the Executive Director of the Development, Educational Development Department in the Ministry of Education in Jordan. She has a large experience in collaboration. She has a large experience in collaborating with international and regional organizations, in addition to working with scientific institutions in Jordan. My colleague Anis will be interviewing her. Anis and Dr. Lama. Thank you, Ahmed. I thank the participants. Hello, Doctor. I thank you for being part of this session. The first question, based on your experience in the Ministry of Education, what are the challenges that the Ministry of Education is facing in amending the schooling programs to keep pace with the needs of the labor market? Thank you. The challenges are large and numerous in the Ministry of Education in Jordan. The most important challenge we face is the fact that we do not have a national framework that brings together all the players and contributors who are related or concerned with the labor market. For example, the sectoral councils are new now, and they only play a regulator role. They do not contribute to delivery or reviewing of curriculums. These sectoral councils, at the end of the day, they represent the labor market. Also, there is this mismatch between the labor market and the educational institutions. We're trying to address this by developing a national framework that identifies roles and responsibilities, that identifies as well the business relations so that we can address this mismatch between the teaching curriculums and the labor market needs and demands. In addition, to develop the curriculums, we need a structure and we need tools. And we have a large problem when it comes to workshops. Because the workshops, to equip the workshops with the required equipment and tools, that's also a challenge to us. We need to address a very important difficulty as well. The fact that we're not sharing data. So it's not only a matter of data sharing, also data is not being updated periodically. We have, say for example, we have pre-COVID data on the requirements and competences needed by the labor market. This has not been updated after COVID-19. So qualifications and competencies framework has to be updated to cater to the needs and requirements by the labor market, in addition to the skills mismatch, the supply and demand. So we need to identify these so that we as educational faculties, we update our curriculums. And for that, the private sector and the sectoral councils and the social sector should be represented in any attempt to revisiting and developing curriculums. They need to reflect and have a say on the requirements. As you said, COVID-19 has changed a lot and it gave rise to what we call now the digital school and studying remotely online. So how can the Ministry of Education can contribute to enhancing the e-learning, the digital school initiative, also upscaling the competencies, these rising competencies. As I said earlier, we need to develop this framework based on an effective evaluation. We need to evaluate the needs of schools based on the requirements of the curriculum. And the curriculum has to be developed also in partnership with the sectoral councils. So we need to identify the frameworks that we're working by based on the assessment of the situation. So that takes us to identify a national strategy involving all line ministries, the private sector, the social sector, the Ministry of the Youth, and everyone would have their roles and responsibilities. And that would ensure an integrated effort to avoid any works, any efforts, any silo efforts. So we need to train the young in such a way and educate them in such a way to meet the needs of the labor market. Another thing, the resources. I should have resources. I should be able to identify the workshops, the machinery, that the tools that I need to train my students. And for that, a prerequisite is the partnership with the private sector. So I need to facilitate facilitated for the businesses to accommodate apprenticeships, give them incentives, provide them with aids. So there should be a governmental institutionalization for the incentives of the private sector or the PPPs. Last thing, When I say, for example, I want to deliver a technical training, there should be criteria for that. To deliver an effective technical training, the trainer should be the right trainer, the curriculum should be the right curriculum, the machinery should be the right ones. So we're talking here about a number of interrelated elements that should be identified by the national strategy. In 2 minutes, what are the measures to be adopted by the Ministry of Education in order to provide the services of career orientation? Career guidance in our country should not start at a at a higher age. We should be starting at an early age. And before that, they need to understand what is a labor market, what is a profession. So we conduct professional orientation at early age. In addition, we need to work with the sectoral councils, with the private sector, with all the players. And we need to work with school hubs, assign them trained teams for orientation. Thank you, Mrs. Lama. Thank you for answering our questions. And let's move back to Ahmed. Thank you, Anis. Thank you, Dr. Lama, for the beautiful interventions. The last interview we have today with my colleague, Majid, who will be interviewing Emmanuel Rohr from the European Commission. It works, so this department works with the sectoral commissions. Mrs. Emmanuel Rohr has a large experience in cooperation initiatives at this level. Let's move to my colleague to start this interview. Majid. Hello, madam, and we're happy to have you. Allow me to start this quick interview. We noticed that in some projects that are some finance projects that enable the youth to acquire more job skills are decreasing. So these projects are vanishing. Based on your experience, how can we improve the monitoring and evaluation mechanisms of these projects to make sure that they are continuous and sustainable?
Many thanks, Majid, and I'm very pleased to attend this interview today. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for giving the opportunity to the European Commission to participate. So thank you very much for this question. You are actually touching two important issues in the cooperation between donors and technical and financial partners, sustainability and country ownership. You are right, too many times projects, even the most successful, and as soon as the external funding is over or soon afterwards. At the European Union, we really work closely with national authorities and all concerned stakeholders from the very beginning of any intervention to make sure that it is fully owned by them and becomes their project, so that what is co-created through the action, be it practices, methodologies, tools, are fully integrated in the systems, in the measures, and in the policies. So in order to ensure their continuity and their sustainability, as you rightly pointed out, tracking and evaluating are definitively important. They are really essential to build evidence that can be used by decision makers and policy practitioners, as well as constitute constructive feedback for any future intervention. However, they are not sufficient. Saying and proving evidence that a project has been successful in, for instance, developing skills and increase youth employability is just a first step towards longer-term sustainability. And here, I think that country ownership becomes crucial, including early stage discussion on policy uptake and relevance of new actions. A project financed by external donors need to become a project owned by national institutions, stakeholders, and beneficiaries. Ministries and other relevant stakeholders, like, for instance, social partners, workers and employers associations, and civil society must be involved throughout the whole project life, really to believe in its importance and to feel responsible and accountable for its outcomes. So understanding deeply the objectives and intent of a project will really help decision makers to see its potential for the future, for its implementation and scaling up, including also finding the necessary resources to ensure its mainstreaming. So to sum up, I think that in order to increase the country ownership and foster project sustainability, it is essential to identify policy uptake and relevance of actions, keep the political level involved, but also raise awareness on the opportunities for change that the project can offer, communicate as wide as possible project results and its impacts, and also seek partnerships at country level to bring in other partners that could be interested in bringing the project forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Emmanuel. So, as I understand, you were speaking on enhancing the ownership of these projects to make sure they are sustainable. You, as representing the European Commission, how does the European Union deal with the Arab world in this specific topic of the transition of the young men to the decent work and decent jobs and the labor market in general?
Yeah, thank you, Majid. Youth is, for the European Union, is really at the very heart of the European partnership with the Arab world, particularly with the Mediterranean region. We firmly believe that young people are agents of change, And the European Commission has recently, last February, adopted a new agenda for the Mediterranean. And also our president, the president of the European Commission, has designated 2022 as the European Year of Youth. In the new partnership with the Mediterranean, the European Union highlights to support the mainstreaming of youth in national policies. It proposes also to help our partners to improve their education systems governance, and also to give priority to address the structural causes of school dropouts. So notably to support the young people who are not in education, employment or training, but also to address skills mismatches and youth unemployment. So youth is really a priority in the bilateral cooperation the European Union has with its partners in the Mediterranean region, but also in the regional cooperation, and notably within the Union for the Mediterranean, which is a regional fora gathering the 27 EU member states and its southern and eastern Mediterranean partners. In this respect, I would like to mention that we will organize soon in Morocco on the 17th and 18th of May, Union for the Mediterranean Ministerial on Employment and Labor. And precisely the focus of this ministerial, so this meeting of all the ministers of the region, will be on employment and employability of the most vulnerable, especially among youth and women. So really to show as example the priority given to youth in the Mediterranean region. The European Union seeks also effective coordination and partnerships with youth organizations, which are really crucial for boosting quality employment as well as education and training opportunities. Another block of this approach is mobility. We need to work together to increase people-to-people contacts as a successful cooperation area with tangible results and benefits for all. So we are opening up and facilitating access to EU programs for our southern partners, as well as to the relevant European networks. In this context, as example, I can say that the southern Mediterranean is a priority region for the Erasmus Plus program. And over the 2021-2027 period under Erasmus Plus, young people will benefit from new capacity building opportunities in the fields of vocational education and training, sport, and digital education. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Emmanuel, in your opinion, to which extent will we be needing to provide these trainings in Arabic to make sure that we access all the youth in their own language? Very briefly, if you may.
Yeah, indeed, the point of language is key, and we really need to communicate in an easy and understandable way. Arabic is clearly a dominant language in the region. It's obvious. So the current EU cooperation actions in the Mediterranean countries are primarily using Arabic to maximize dissemination education and outreach. So a lot of materials are available in Arabic, and you may also refer to the for instance, to the websites of the EU delegations in the countries where you have access to these materials, and also to the web pages translated into Arabic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all these efforts. We see that many projects are being implemented in urban areas or in cities. Why do not, in your opinion, why do we not see projects implemented in peripheral areas, in remote areas?
Well, I would say that reaching the most vulnerable young people can be more challenging because of many reasons, such as lack of infrastructure to get to those places, lack of institutional interlocutors, and sometimes also for political reasons. But this said, I would like to emphasize that the European Union is particularly committed to leave no one behind, and really to focus on the most vulnerable. As I said, the focus of our Ministerial on Employment and Labour within the Union for the Mediterranean will be precisely on the most vulnerable, especially among youth and women. So to achieve this, the European Union has been progressively paying more and more attention to the local level, with actions, with interventions designed to work both with the central and the local levels. So the European Union usually works with local NGOs and other civil society organizations that are active in those specific areas. This also helps raising capacities of actors at local levels to untap the potential of human capital, not only in the urban areas, but also in local and rural areas. So thanks to the substantial analytical work done by the European Union, including through its agency, the European Training Foundation, we continuously assess labor markets, and we look for tools and policies that can support the transition from school to work, raise employability, and more generally social and economic integration of young people. So this really requires strong collaboration between all the partners involved to make sure that we provide quality education for all, and especially the most vulnerable, but also that the vocational education and training programs are relevant for the labor market. Career guidance services are available to all the young people. Thank you, Majid.
Thank you, Ahmed, and thank you all for all these interviews. I will move now to my colleague to give us the key messages of this session. Fadila will be sharing with us the key messages and the key conclusions of these interviews. Fadila. Let me move again to Rana to share with us the main conclusions of these interviews. I will be short on trade unions. We focused on the fact that the trade unions are playing a major role in the Arab region in defending the rights of the youth and defending them against any violations, in addition to identifying those countries that limit the mobilization of trade unions, also the weak resources of linking the youth to the labor market, the competitiveness between the supply and demand, the fact that the youth are not present in decision-making processes, the youth are not aware of their trade union rights, the need to raise the awareness of the youth in the field of complaining and participating in grievances councils, the social contract and the need to have decent social contracts and labor contracts. Also instituting an Arab fund for social protection. Also, the measures that we can undertake in this field is launching social practices and the business practices that keep from workplace harassment. On entrepreneurship, the most risks that impact on entrepreneurship is the school dropouts that impact on joining the labor market. Standing also maybe one solution to that is standing up to the high competitiveness between the businesses led by certain politicians. Also in the field of education, there is a need to focus on those projects that promote social services and the acquisition of skills and push towards more internships. Also, make sure that we identify the needs of the needs of the market and the skills required of the youth. We know that one of the shortcomings is the fact that we lack a national framework that brings together all stakeholders for a consistent approach to this work. The need to periodically amend and update the curriculums. In addition, we need to establish a more interactive association between the educational sector and the labor market, identify the effective training mechanisms, provide orientation, career orientation at a very young age. At the donors level, they need to provide sustainable and long-term projects by making sure that these projects have served their objectives. Also, it's important to involve the youth at a national level. It's one of the priorities of the EU because they consider the youth as agents of change. Also, the European Union is keen on providing their material in Arabic to ensure the wider possible access to the Arab young men. Also, the European Union
So it's important to target the vulnerable youth. Thank you, and sorry for taking too long. Thank you for the summary. We're sorry for the technical glitch. Another apology because of the limited time. We're running late. We won't be able to get the questions of the participants. However, this session will be posted on the UNICEF Regional Office's website and YouTube. All of the answers that were posted will be answered from the Q&A. So you will find the answers under comments to the YouTube video. To conclude, I'd say that we had a very nice session, a great day. All of the inputs aim at the improvement and the development. I'd like to thank all of the contributors. I'd like to mention Mrs. Samar, Mrs. Lama, Mr. Emmanuel, Mr. Nader, Marlene, and Dr. Kushur. Big thanks to all of you and the ESQUA team. Can you hear us, please? Do you hear us, please? Yes, can you hear me? I have a couple of things to mention. Can you allow me to do so? Yes, I just would like to speak about the education and employment. You didn't mention people with disabilities. The school students with disabilities who largely suffer because the schools are not educationally equipped or logistically equipped. Even buses are not well equipped for people with disabilities. And I hope that you would put it under recommendations to be taken into consideration, and even teaching and training the instructors and teachers on the requirements to fulfill the needs of the people with disabilities. In the Arab world, there are shares for the employment of the people with disabilities. In Lebanon, the law stipulates for 3% of employment of people with special needs in both the public and private sector. I just wanted to mention that because you didn't bring up the case of the people with special needs. Yes, we had a full note on the people with disabilities. We did submit the recommendations to the decision makers, and I remember that I had colleagues from this session, and we had a full-fledged session for people with disabilities. And of course, we need to be mentioning them. I'm very thankful for you. Thank you very much. Another thing, please, if you allow me. Yes, but in brief, in 30 seconds, because we don't want to delay others. All right, yes, sure. Thank you. I'd like to thank the organizers. I thank you for giving me this time because I want to speak about the young people in general who have started getting mobilized despite the dramatic circumstances with the war and the economic blockade. Of course, we need to be finding solutions and providing recent work to them. However, thanks to you and with your support, I hope that you would be assisting educational, economic, productive, and entrepreneurship businesses in my country, Syria, that witnessed for 1 decade wars and challenges so that we get to decent employment. And I hope that you would be responding to the needs of the youth of my country that I'm proud of. Thank you very much. One quick recommendation, if you allow me. One quick and straightforward recommendation. Please post it in the chat. I'm sorry. No, in 30 seconds only. I do not have any talk. Okay, I did write it from the beginning to reconsider and promote the lifelong learning systems and policies, because policies are essential. As you mentioned at the beginning of the session, the poll showed 51% for the public sector. So we need to be developing the lifelong learning policies for the public sector, and it should be binding for the NGOs, the private sector, and the public sectors for the sake of transition to employment. Thank you very much, sir. I'm sorry, I will not accept any more interventions. I'm sorry, but we're running out of time. I'd like to thank all of those who were on the call, especially from the regional offices of the different UN agencies and representatives of private and public sectors. Thank you all. Special thanks to the interpreters who were with us, Mrs. Haneen as well. Thank you very much from the regional office. At the end, let me say that today's session was a call to action. It wasn't only an additional round table. The youth are the key to the future. That is why we call you to start engaging them in the future's policies. Thank you very much. Hope to see you soon.